So my name's Daniel Palmer. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Officer for an organisation called the IOPC. That's the Independent Office for Police Conduct. So in my role, I cover the southeast region. So that's 11 regions surrounding London, including Essex. I'm based in Waltham Forest, just on the borders of Epping Forest. So I've got Epping Forest in my background, and yeah, I'm often out and about in Essex. My in-laws are from Essex, and yeah, so half of my heart is Essex rooted. Um, so what is today about? So a lot of my role is raising awareness of the IOPC. There's not a lot of people who know what we do, who we are, and if they do know who we are, it's not quite clear about how we fit into police accountability. So today is about raising awareness of who we are. But it's also about giving you the opportunity to talk about your experiences, whether that's personally, if you're comfortable sharing around the police complaint system or policing in general. If you've got experiences of supporting others, or you think you might have examples where you might have experiences of supporting others through the police complaint system, want to hear from you as well. So the key objective of this meeting is to talk to you about the police complaint system. The police complaint system can be very bureaucratic, it can be very long, very drawn out, potentially re-traumatizing. So you potentially as advocates want to try and provide you with information to support your service users around navigating the police complaint system. So hopefully you'll go away with certainly a bit more information about the IOPC and the police complaint system. So I am going to unfortunately start with a bit of an icebreaker. If you're not comfortable speaking, please feel free to use the chat bar. But if I just wanted to hear, so I can get an idea of who I'm talking to, if you could just say your name, your role, what your current knowledge is of the IOPC, and one word that comes to mind when you think of the police complaint system, and be as open and honest as you like. If you've never used it, never heard, never had an experience, fine. If you have used it and you thought it was absolutely terrible, I'm not precious about the police complaint system. So yeah, please do be honest. Jamie, got your hand up.
Thanks, Danny. I wanted to jump in just to kind of break the ice a little bit for everyone. So I can do myself, and then we can go around if everyone else wants to jump in. So my name's Jamie Langstone, and as I said at the beginning, I'm the Sector and Partnership Manager here at SAVS. My current knowledge of the IOPC is quite, I would say, quite good. Probably not where it needs to be, but we do represent the community and the voluntary sector within our policing forum, the Independent Advisory Group, and often complaints do come up in that forum, especially around updates on complaints, things like that. And I guess one word that comes to mind for me when I think of police complaints, especially from the feedback that we've had in the group, is uncertain, I would say. So process, people seem to think that it's quite easy, especially some of the anonymous reporting that you can do online. However, there's quite a long gap between an update, and sometimes those updates might not come along. So we've a great police force in Southend, and they do a great job to update people. However, there's always those opportunities where sometimes it's not quite as clear as people would want it to be. So that's probably what I would say.
Thanks, Jamie. That's really helpful. Tina, you're next on my screen, so I'm just gonna.
Hiya. Hi. So, yes, I'm Tina. My role, I'm an IDVA at Safe Steps. We're the Domestic Abuse Support Service for Southend, Castle Point, and Rochford. I have supported a couple of clients actually to make a referral to the IOPC, which has given pretty good outcomes. However, I'm here today because I don't actually understand what happened between the referral and the outcome. So I was hoping to get a bit of insight into what processes you follow to get those good outcomes.
Okay.
I think the police in Southend, like Jamie said, we do have good police officers in Southend. I think we're pretty lucky there in terms of updates and things like that. Certainly a lot better these days than they were. But like Jamie also said, there are still some gaps in places. So yeah, thank you.
That's really helpful, Tina. And actually, I'm going to be talking a bit today about our Vorg work as well, and we can
That would be
potentially talk
great.
about some follow-on work with Safe Steps as well, if you think that would be
Yeah,
beneficial.
brilliant. Yes, thank you.
Cheers. And Rosemary.
I'm a youth leader at a local Baptist church. I've absolutely no knowledge of the Independent Office for Police Conduct. I didn't even know it existed. So I'm starting at minus something, I think, actually. But I was just curious when I saw it advertised.
Great, thank you, Rosemary. Well, you'll definitely learn something today. You've already learned that we exist, so that's great.
Right.
Layla.
I'm Laila Abraham. I'm on the board for the voluntary services in Harlow. I would say I know about IOPC, but what I keep hearing is that they are not very able or efficient. I have not made any complaint myself, but in Harlow, people haven't got a very high opinion about IOPC.
Okay, thank you. And Beth.
Hi there, I'm Beth Hooper. I work for an organisation called Blade Education. We're a small not-for-profit that does all kinds of bridge building, but our current focus has been learning disability and autism. So we recently have done a project called Help Us Be Safe, which is about reconnecting the learning disability and autism community to the police and all sorts of things, and actually finding out how we can all help each other to do a better job. So I don't know an awful lot about the Independent Office of Police Conduct. The only couple of times I've come up against it, I'm afraid it has been negative. But I just thought it would be very helpful for, we often translate to our community what your kind of organisation is, and I think that can be very useful.
Okay, great, thank you. Arifa.
Hi, I'm Arifa. I work for Citizens Advice here in Southend. Just sort of what the other guys have said to do with the police in Southend. We're quite lucky. We do get a lot of support from them. There's a lot that are like on patrol. So when we have the clinics and if anything was to happen, we're able to get help pretty quick. Generally to do with IOPC, not much. Personally, I've not really dealt with them. I know they exist and what they do on a basic level. But I would just wanted to say about the police, we did have 2 female police officers come in earlier this year to just tell us about our own safety as staff, because we do have a lot of sort of, people outside the office, so just for our general safety, and provided us with like the safety alarms and that type of thing. So police in general locally have been really supportive and helpful.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little brief history of who we are and how we came about. So the IPC, we're entirely independent of the police. So our role is to investigate the police over the most serious cases of misconduct, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So whilst investigating the police, we also set the standards for how the police complaint system is run. So we will liaise with police forces about what the trends, what the numbers are, how they're handling their complaints, and then we provide guidance about potentially how they handle VOR complaints or cases involving discrimination. So yeah, we work closely with police forces, and our main objective is similar to the police, is that we want to build trust and confidence in policing through accountability, through transparency, and we're ultimately working with the police to look to improve systems and processes as well. So I'm just going to throw out a question. Feel free to shout out or tap into the chat bar. When was the Met Police formed? What year? So the Met Police was the first, as far as I'm aware, the first Metropolitan Force formed. I isn't it Europe or the world? I don't know. That might be wrong, but I'm going to check that afterwards to remind myself. But any idea of what year? 1850. Any other guesses on that?
I would have still said 1800s, but a bit later than 1850. 1886.
That's when Arsenal were formed. Any others?
No idea, to be honest.
No idea. Okay, so it is 1800s. It was 1829. So 1829 was it was a good guess, Beth. So 1829, it was, you would have likely heard of the Home Secretary at the time, Sir Robert Peel. So when you hear about the police being called peelers, or the Peelian principles of policing by consent, it was Sir Robert Peel who formed the Met Police in 1829. So I mentioned that because I kind of want to highlight, I suppose, how young the accountability system is and how young we are as an organisation. And that, I think, as you're probably aware, does represent some challenges. So there was a police complaints board that was set up in 1977. But prior to that, you had to go to your police and that was that. There was no system to submit complaints. There was issues with the police complaints board at the time around corruption and various concerns around police marking their own homework. But a key date was 1981, the Lord Scarman report, which some of you might be aware of. So that was in response to a lot of riots up and down the country, which was amongst other. So we saw it in Brixton, St Paul's, Handsworth, to name a few. This was in response to the over-policing, particularly of young black men through the SUS laws. I can't remember the specific numbers, but you were looking at about 1,000 stop and searches per week at some stage, and then you would have excessive use of force. But you might remember 1981 is often referenced. So the Lord Scarman report was looking into those riots and looking at the reasons and those clashes with police. And so the Lord Scarman, amongst many recommendations, he said police should better represent the communities they're serving, so to be more diverse, but there also needs to be a more robust accountability system of the police complaints. So we saw the Police Complaints Authority set up in 1985. So fast forward to the murder of Stephen Lawrence, which I'm sure everyone will be aware of. You'll all be aware of the tireless campaigning of the Lawrence family into the failings of the Met Police around that investigation. So that prompted the publication of the Macpherson report in 1999. So the Macpherson report, we see a lot of like the recommendations made in the Macpherson report in place today. So Jamie mentioned IAGs. IAGs came about through recommendations from the Macpherson report. You'd have more robust victims' rights around hate crime. You see better family liaison from the police since the recommendations. But a key recommendation for us was the Macpherson report calling for an independent body to hold the police to account. So following on from the Police Reform Act in 2002, 2004, the IPCC was set up. So that was our predecessor, basically. So in 2004, our organisation were looking at predominantly cases coming out of the Stephen Lawrence investigation and also Hillsborough. So Hillsborough, if anyone doesn't know, is where 97 people died at Hillsborough Stadium in 1989. So we've been looking at investigations coming out of Hillsborough since 2004, and it's only now we're actually closing closing that. We've had an office dedicated to that since 2004 in Warrington. So IPCC in 2004, we were quite small. We're still quite small. But at the time, we recruited many of our staff from the police. So at the time, 40% of staff were ex-police officers. So naturally, that also prompted criticism. stating that people felt that the IPCC were too pro-police, not independent enough, and marking their own homework. So fast forward to 2018, the IPCC became the IOPC. So there's quite key changes from moving to 2018. So the IOPC, we're an organisation of just over 1,000 people. We cover England and Wales, so we've got 6 offices covering England and Wales. But legislation has made it so if in key decision-making roles, so from director of engagement, deputy director above, what was used to be called regional director, and also our director general, you're not allowed to have worked for the police. So as our organisation now, 10% of our organisation are ex-police officers. I would feel it's very important to still have ex-police officers within our organisation. It's important to understand the systems that we are investigating, holding to account, the cultures. So having that, I think it's always important to have a diversity of thought and experience. So we recruit people from a wide range of services, but our ex-police officers are very important to understanding the institutions we hold to account. So other key changes when we became the IOPC, it was felt that we needed to be a lot more outward facing, getting out there, raising awareness of who we are and what we do. So my team was set up, the regional stakeholder engagement team. I started working for the IOPC in 2019, but we also have increased powers from 2018. So at the moment, there's a legal requirement. If there's any death or serious injury, the police have to legally refer a case onto us for us to independently investigate. So let's say, for example, there's a fatal collision after a police chase on the A12. We would be called, our investigators would be called out straight away onto that scene. We would be attending the scene. We would be interviewing officers, and that case would automatically be referred on to us. So if there's a police shooting, anything like that, any death or serious injury, legally the police have to refer a case on to us. That also counts for certain levels of misconduct that I'll go through in a bit as well. But we also now have the power to call in a case, which is called the power of initiative. So if we feel that there's a case that's causing significant community concerns and it's of a public interest, we have the ability to call in a case and say, we think that you should refer this on to us as well. So that's a brief roundabout history. As I mentioned, we're entirely independent of the police and independent of government. We oversee the police complaint system, but we're also about learning. So we work with the police to look at their systems, their policies, their training, and looking at gaps. So where we investigate a case, we might identify gaps that quick fixes can be improved as well. So we also, whilst we hold officers to account, we also look at the kind of wider learning of changes within policing as well. So you're probably already sick of my voice, so I'm going to do a quick bit of true or false to get some interactions. So I'm going to ask to see what your current knowledge is. So to make a complaint about the police, you have to complain to the police. Just put in the chat T or F or true or false. If you think that's true, type true. If you think it's false, say false. Okay, we've got a mixture there. So it's a bit of a trick question. Sorry. It's true and false. So I'll go into more depth about this bit later on. You can complain directly to the IOPC. You can do it via our website. You can do it over the phone if there's reasonable adjustments. but they will always go back to the force first for them to handle it, to have an opportunity to handle it. So, for example, if you were to submit a complaint to us via our website, it would go to Essex Professional Standards Department and they would contact you. Otherwise, you can complain directly to the police themselves. So that's, again, a legal requirement, and that's to provide a force with the opportunity to deal with it first and foremost. So at times it can be dealt with quite quickly. So if you were to, say, had an issue with your local Sainsbury's, you want to go to the general manager first for them to have the opportunity to sort out there or then. It's only if it's more serious that it would then come to us. But just to go through some quick bit of information. So there are 43 forces in England and Wales. So that's over 225,000 officers. Again, shout out or put in the chat, how many complaints do you think were made last year about the police, to the police? So yeah, any ballpark, total guesses, total fine. How many complaints do you think were made?
Hi, Daniel. Just checking that there wasn't a slide that said that on, because we've got to make a complaint about the police. You have to complain to the police at the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, we've got lots of numbers coming up here. So last year, complaints made to police across England and Wales was around 90,000. So that's also expressions of dissatisfaction. So if you tweet Essex Police, you say you were rubbish, you dealt with this burglary terribly, that would count as a complaint. So of 90,000, the vast majority are the Met Police, which isn't surprising. The Met Police have got, I think, 33,000. God, no, have I got that wrong? They've got about 30-odd thousand officers. So the vast majority of complaints, I think it is 30-odd thousand, are to the Met Police. Essex Police, any idea how many complaints were made to Essex Police last year? So you're talking April to April. Of those 90,000, if you got the Met Police, which is 30-odd thousand, how many were Essex? $8,000. Okay, so it's 2,000. 2,000 were made to Essex Police. So as I mentioned, we only deal with the most serious. So we deal with around about 350 independent investigations each year. So that's the most serious. We're looking to build that up to about 500 next year. And I think we had about 10 just 10 independent investigations from Essex last year. So that's 10 out of about 300. So Beth, that's 2,000 police complaints were made to Essex Police last year. And yeah, of those, 10 were of the most serious that we dealt with independently. So on to the next one. There is no time limit for making a complaint about the police. Is that true or false? False, yeah. Yeah, you'll probably remember I mentioned Hillsborough a minute ago. So yeah, oh, sorry. It is true. There is no time limit. So I've confused myself with that. So there's no time limit to make a complaint about the police. So yeah, I mentioned about Hillsborough, and certainly, you know, we're aware of some of the very sad historic child sexual abuse cases in Rochdale and so on. There are instances where it would have happened, and very valid reasons, especially for people who work around child sexual abuse or will be aware, or sexual or VOG. There's very clear reasons as to why there isn't a time limit. However, we would always stress it's really important, if you can, to make a complaint as soon as possible. Any ideas as to why that might be? And feel free to shout out. So if I asked you, and just because I can see you, Tina, what you had for lunch yesterday.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So I would assume then it's the timely thing would be because of witness recall, evidence preservation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So quite an important thing to be aware of is you'll see all officers, and I think it's a requirement within Essex, all officers wear body-worn video cameras on them. So when they interact with the public, they will be turning that on. And if there's a serious incident, well, that footage will only be held, as far as I'm aware, for 30 days, unless a complaint is made or unless there is use of force or a serious incident. So it's important to capture that evidence, as Tina was mentioned. But yeah, why the CCTV things? I mean, our investigators, they will look at things like Ring doorbell footage, look at bus CCTV footage. But yeah, as we're mentioning, witness recollections as well. I mean, we forget things fairly quickly. So we'd always urge people to make a complaint, if you're making a complaint, to make it as soon as possible. And if it is over 12 months, you would be asked why. Why was that a reason for the delay? So I mentioned this earlier, but I'm just going to go through a bit of a journey of a complaint. So you can complain directly to the police. You can attend a police station. You can ring 111. You can do it via Essex website. You can do it via our website as well. However, as I mentioned, it goes back to Essex Police for them to look at first. What I can do as well is send you information about that complaints process as well for you. So particularly Tina or people who work with service users, I can send out an advocacy pack that you can share amongst your staff as well, who'll give you that full complaints journey. So if you were to make a complaint, it's important to be as specific as possible, to provide as much information as possible. So in particular, and I'm talking specifically around VOG or race discrimination, we provide guidance to the police about how those complaints are handled. So sometimes if there is a complaint made around mishandling of a VOG case or around discrimination, it's important to be as specific as possible. So that's, for an officer, it's shoulder numbers, vehicle registration, names if you can get them, but be as specific as possible. But I would also say to highlight what you would hope to happen as an outcome. So if, for example, you are submitting a complaint on someone else's behalf and they say, I want that officer to lose their job, that might be something that someone can have a conversation with early on and say, look, this is not something where an officer would lose their job. Or if someone says, I want compensation, this process doesn't offer compensation. So sometimes those early conversations at the beginning manages expectations as to what this process could potentially bring as well. Could the screenshots be bigger? Yeah. How do I do that? Sorry. I don't know how to make it bigger.
We can share them. I know it might be a bit difficult to see them now, but we could share them afterwards as well, after the slides have been shown,
Yeah.
so that people can go through them and recollect.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Rosemary. I can't. What is that? Hang on.
If you're on Teams, Rosemary, at the very bottom left-hand corner, and you've got it installed on your computer, you can see where it says navigate the slides. And then if you click the little 3 dots on more actions.
What? No, I haven't got Teams on the computer. I've just done it through your link.
Oh, okay. So you might not have that option. We'll make sure to share them with you if that's all right, Daniel, and maybe we can scale them up then.
I was just trying to use them to follow what Daniel was saying.
Yeah, of course. I'll try and find an option in the meantime for you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Rosemary. I can't see how to make it bigger from my end. But yeah, as Jamie said, we'll send across the slides as well, so you can see them. So just to go through the journey of a complaint, and this is maybe potentially where it becomes slightly long and bureaucratic. So you've made a complaint. Let's say you've done it through our website. It's gone back to Essex Professional Standards Department. Someone will then contact you. So they should be contacting you within 28 working days. We've got the statistics around that, and Essex Police are very good at contacting complainants. If you aren't contacted within that 28 working days, you can contact us and we can chase up Essex PSD. So you will be contacted by someone from Essex PSD who will start talking to you about your complaint. Now, at this stage, you will get the option of whether that complaint is formally recorded or it can be dealt with informally outside Schedule 3. And this is again dependent on seriousness. So if it's something that maybe someone can deal with within Essex Police very quickly, it's just potentially low level where, say, for example, maybe a quick apology can be made and a service user complainant is happy with that, or it's a recovery of service. So something can be dealt with very quickly, and that's all that a complainant needs, and then it can be dealt with there and then. That's where it's informally dealt with. If it's formally dealt with, and you can request that it's formally dealt with, if it's formally dealt with, it's called inside Schedule 3. Again, don't worry about these key bits of information. I can send these across. But if you formally record it, that then triggers the process of where that is formally looked at by Essex PSD. And so, for example, you should be getting 28 working day updates. So if it could be that you're then notified as to how that's going to formally be looked at. It might be formally investigated by the Professional Standards Department, in which case you will then get updates every 28 working days. Again, if you don't get those updates, I would recommend chasing the PSD or us, and we can ensure that that's picked up. So you will then be told how that complaint is going to be handled. It's then looked at. In the most serious instances, it could come to us straight away, but that's if it's very serious. When it's then handled, you will then get an outcome of how that has been dealt with. So let's say it's been locally investigated by Essex PSD. You will have a named contact who you can contact. You should have a reference number of your complaint. You should get those complaint updates every 28 working days. You will then come to the end of the process, and you will get an outcome. So yourself or your service user can look at the outcome of that investigation, and you will have the option of submitting it for review, or it used to be called an appeal. So if you or your service user are not happy with the outcome of that investigation into your complaint, you can request that that is looked at. So it will either be looked at, again, depending on the seriousness, it will either go to Essex OPFCC. So they are, if you aren't aware, so they're the people, they're the police and crime commissioners. I can't remember the Essex guy's name. What's his name? Does anyone know? Jamie?
Roger Hurst.
Roger Hurst, right. So the PCCs will look at the case, how that was dealt with, and they will determine whether or not they feel that the police dealt with that appropriately. So it will either go to them or it will come to us. So as you can see, Beth, what will happen when they go? That's a really good question that we don't know yet. So I don't know how it's going to be in relation to Essex, whether it's going to go mayoral, but that's Beth. It's a very good question. There is no decision being made around this yet, so it will either be going to a mayoral system, I think, or it will go towards the council being dealt with. Yeah, just to make things even more confusing. So when you get that outcome letter of the police complaint, you will say the option whether you want to submit a review. Now, again, the key number here, you have to submit that review within 28 working days. It has to be done within 28 working days, unless there's extenuating circumstances as to why. So it either goes to Essex OPCC, or it comes to us, the IOPC, and our casework team. Again, we will look at it. We will determine as to whether the police dealt with that complaint correctly. If we don't feel it's been dealt with correctly, we will either tell the force to look at it again. We might offer some learning recommendations or urge the force to make an apology, or we will take it on ourselves to look at and provide an outcome. In the most serious instances, it will come to us to independently investigate, as well, as I mentioned. So what we can do, if it does come to us, as I mentioned, we can make a recommendation to the police. We can make sure they apologise or look at providing a remedy to resolving a complaint. We can look at learning. We can direct a force to re-investigate the complaint or agree that it was dealt with reasonably or proportionately. If we agree that the police force dealt with a case reasonably or proportionately, that's the end of the process. That's the end of the line. The only recourse after that is judicial review, which can be quite expensive. So yeah, that is ultimately the end of the process if it comes to that point. What we can't do, I mentioned earlier, we can't direct an organisation to provide compensation. We can't open criminal investigations. We can't re-investigate the original complaint ourselves. And we can't comment on new evidence as well. So you might at this stage be thinking, this is ridiculous. I can't even see the point in this. Why bother complaining? Which is all very valid feelings. So I've just put those pros and cons on the screen. I don't want to sit here telling you you should definitely make a complaint against the police, or you should sit there urging your service users to make a complaint. It's about we want to make sure that you and your service users are informed to make those decisions. Especially, Tina, as you know, within the VORG sector, we've got such low levels of even reporting to the police because of what we know around potentially re-traumatizing, the low conviction rates. So we're very aware of the barriers around then potentially asking a victim or survivor to then go down this route. So that's why we're particularly working with organisations such as yourselves, so you can be informed, so your service user can make that informed choice, and you can make that complaint on their behalf, as long as you've got signed consent. However, I would say sometimes, even if you're not getting an outcome that you feel is right, it helps for patterns of behaviour. And using VORG as an example again, some of you might be aware of officers such as David Carrick or Wayne Cousins. There are these officers where their behaviour should have been flagged earlier. So if you're making a complaint, and you can make a complaint about if an officer is rude to you, or if they haven't dealt with or inappropriate contact, in particular, if you've got an officer contacting a victim survivor via Facebook or on personal accounts, like this needs to be reported, and then it's there on their file. So if and when a complaint is submitted or investigated, their file is looked at for previous patterns of behaviour. So it is worth sometimes submitting those complaints, because it really helps with things such as that. So I'm not going to go through the list of pros or cons there, but they're there. It's quite a handy slide, because I don't want to ever look like I'm shopping for complaints. And we're very well aware of barriers around the complaint system. I'm conscious of time, so I want to provide time for questions, so I might just kind of try and rattle through a few here. So I've mentioned about us independently investigating cases for the most serious, so I just want to go through the different referral routes. So we will work with Essex Professional Standards Department. They will either get a complaint from someone, or an incident will happen, or they will identify some misconduct in the force. They will either they will contact us and say, we've had this complaint, we've had this incident, we've identified this misconduct, we want to make you aware. So our assessment unit will then determine how that's dealt with. We will either say, yes, we need to take this on independently, so that's the most serious, or we will hand it back to the force and say, we feel that you can deal with this appropriately, so we will say, you deal with that. In rare instances, we will say, we will state a directed investigation. So this is done in covert operations. Say you sometimes have, say, officers selling drugs, then we will be working with the PSD, supporting them around directed investigations. And that's where the local force are investigating it, but we will be supervising that, and we will have updates provided to us, and we will be looking at that final outcome. So if it does go to an independent investigation, I'm going to mention some high profile cases that people might be aware of. So most recently, you might have seen the panorama into Charing Cross, where an undercover BBC officer worked in Charing Cross police station and identified inappropriate behaviour, language. So this was an instance where it was referred on to us. Other examples, the shooting of Chris Cabba a few years ago, or the two sisters, Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry, who were two sisters found murdered in a park in Wembley, and you had officers who had taken selfies in front of the dead sisters. So these are also Sarah Everard, David Carrick. These are high profile cases that have come to us that I want you to keep in mind when going through this. So in the most serious cases, say Chris Cabba, we looked at that police shooting and we felt that that was actually reached the threshold, a criminal threshold. So we investigated under a murder investigation. We investigated the officer under criminal caution. So our investigators have police powers, so they have powers of arrest. So we investigated that officer under criminal caution. We conducted that investigation. We then referred it on to the Crown Prosecution Service. So in the most serious instances, we refer to the Crown Prosecution Service. They agreed with us. They felt that it was worth pursuing a murder charge. That then goes to court. And in this particular instance, Martin Blake sat in front of the jury and he was found not guilty. So that's the criminal threshold. The next level down, so Martin Blake, who shot Chris Cabba, it goes to then gross misconduct. Not in all instances, but in this instance, we felt, well, okay, that's reached the gross misconduct threshold. That is then where we refer a case onto a misconduct panel. So a misconduct panel is made up of independent chairs legally qualified chairs, and a senior police officer. So that is when they determine what the sanction is for that officer, and that could be an officer losing their job, final written warnings, etc. So that's then the next outcome. The next outcome down is reflective practice reviews, or no further action for an officer. So that's for an individual officer. Moving towards more wider systemic learning, as I mentioned, sometimes we will recommend improvement around training or policies and guidance. Very conscious of time. These are all Met Police cases. I've just stolen this slide, but that was instances of some high profile cases. I'm going to rattle on because I can send these through. I did just want to mention, so as well as the death or serious injury or the most serious cases of misconduct, we also take a thematic approach to two particular areas which cause the most issues around public confidence around policing, so around VAUG and race discrimination. So we do a lot of thematic work around VAUG, and so there's a slightly lower threshold around cases involving VAUG or race discrimination where we will look at independently. So we've done a lot of work around VAUG, for example. We did something called Ending Victim Blaming Language, where we worked with external stakeholders and looked at how we as an organisation, how do we use victim blaming language, and we looked at how police are potentially using victim blaming language. So we advised and support and provided guidance to the police alongside external VAUG stakeholders around how to avoid that. We also, as I mentioned, we're very well aware of the significant barriers to the police complaint system, particularly from victim survivors of VAUG. So we've done a You Have a Voice campaign. We've done a Know Your Rights campaign where we've got lots of leaflets and things such as these. I don't know if you can see them, that people can have and hand out, and you have it on your information desk where people can look at what will happen around a police complaint. So as I mentioned, we also provide guidance to police around how they handle VAUG complaints. We also do the same with race discrimination. So we provided a most recent Learning the Lessons magazine, it's called, and this is for policing stakeholders, and this has looked at areas of best practice around policing, around VAUG, and we share that nationally. We've also done a report around race discrimination, and it's looking at, this particular report looked at particularly stop and search of particularly black children and the impact on that, and strip search as well. And we provided kind of guidance around how police could be looking at that. So Rosemary, you've got your hand up.
What is VAUG?
Sorry, violence against women and girls.
Oh, thank you.
So you're looking at domestic abuse. So this is, sorry, I should have said that earlier. Spent a long time saying VAUG. Yeah, so I've mentioned our Learning the Lessons magazine as well, and that's shared because it's important, as I mentioned, to share best practice. You've talked about Southend Police and how I think you sounded like you've got good relationships there. Where we see good practice is where there's good relationships between forces and communities, and good relationships between forces and organisations, and where there is that sharing of information going back and forth. So where we've seen instances of good use of lived experience scrutiny panels, for example, we're sharing that more widely to look at learning across the country. I'll just quickly mention also our super complaint system. So super complaints is when we look at wider systemic issues, and we look at that nationally. So we work with the College of Policing and HMICFRS. So HMICFRS, if you can imagine what Ofsted are like for schools, they will look at police forces and look at how a police forces is operating. So you will see an HMI CFRS report on Essex Police. So super complaints can only be made by these designated bodies, 16 designated bodies, which I've got listed there. As you can see, the majority are VORG organisations. So you've got Centre for Women's Justice, Susie Lamplugh Trust. So the ones in bold there are organisations who have made super complaints. And I'm just going to go through the list of super complaints that have been made there on the screen. So the most recent one is looking at nationally, because it's looking at national policing, looking at police response to stalking. So we're looking at how that can be improved. So similarly, Centre for Women's Justice submitted a super complaint around failures in response to police perpetrated domestic abuse as well. So what I can do, I can send links to further information about our super complaint system as well.